This is the Lakers Central Podcast, powered by Crossover Media. Get the best analysis on the 17-time world champion Los Angeles Lakers. Subscribe to Lakers Central on your favorite podcast app or listen at crossoverpodcast.com. Now, let's talk Lakers with your hosts, Alex and Vinay.
So Vinay, around 7:40 Eastern time this morning, Woj broke the news that Anthony Davis re-signed for 5 years, $190 million. Nobody saw the 5-year thing coming. Like, that came out of nowhere, man. But it was funny because, you know, I live on the East Coast and the news hit over here first, obviously. And then like LA Twitter or Lakers Twitter on the LA side woke up and it was like a second wave of everybody getting that news, man. So how are you doing? And did you see that 5-year contract coming at all?
There was nothing that made me think that he was going to take a 5-year deal. I honestly, when I had listed on Twitter basically the three options that I thought he would take, the 5-year, the 2+1 to get to the 10 years of service, or the 1+1 if he's trying to play games in free agency or something like that because he's doing recruiting. I thought the 2+1 or the 1+1 were going to be the more likely options. It makes sense. You already got the championship. So you kind of, now it's, you know, like once you get a championship, obviously you want to get more, but at the same time, like that bug is off of your back. So it's like, you're not as, like, you want to get paid. You want to make sure that you're taken care of. And obviously he passed up a long-term extension with New Orleans, and the very best possible thing could happen. He won a championship in year one with the Lakers. So I didn't see that coming. And my original tweet, I said that if he takes a 5-year deal, that's a massive coup for the Lakers, because we know that, you know, we don't know really what the direction of the cap is going to be. They've speculated that it may go up by like a little bit, you know, like 2% every year for the next 2 years before they kind of relook at everything going back to normal. And so for me, the reason why I thought it would be a massive coup is because at least now we know set in stone what he get paid. There's no confusion about it. So if Rob is trying to create a situation where he wants to get the next guy after LeBron to pair with Anthony Davis, or if LeBron wants to continue being here and we want to add like another younger guy who can eventually grow into being like the partner in crime with Anthony Davis and with LeBron too possible, like at least it gives him some stability to figure out exactly where it's going. So I still think that's exactly where it is. And I think it's a massive coup for Lakers. I know there's an early termination option for that last year, which he's probably going to exercise because he's going to be 31. So he'll probably still be able to get one good contract. Bigs like him can make it to like 35 as long as he takes care of his health. I know that he's been dead serious about taking care of his health. He's like talked to LeBron, and LeBron's helped him out a lot about what kind of regimen he has to have to increase his longevity as a player. So it's great. And to add to what you're saying, I legit woke up this morning, and the first thing I've been doing these past couple of days is let me pull up my phone, bro, because I know one of these trades or something is going to happen when I'm asleep, and I'm going to sleep right now like at 11:30 at night. I've got like this PTSD from like the Clippers Kawhi thing because that news broke so late in the evening. And then, you know, yesterday the Russell Westbrook trade just happens out of the blue, even though we knew that he had already requested the trade. And then, so I was just like, all right, man. AD went to go meet with Rich Paul in the morning with the Lakers. So I'm assuming that the news is going to break at some point. And I know it's going to be one of these 3 deals. And I was like, and then the day just keeps passing. I'm like, what the hell is going on? Like, there's no way that there's so much, you know, like this should take so much time to figure out and stuff like that. But then the LeBron news broke that he took a 2-year extension. I was like, oh, okay, I got it. Like, Rich is like, yo, we need to figure out Bron's situation real quick before we go ahead and talk to the guy who's going to be the cornerstone of your franchise for the next 4 years. So I was like, so when the Bron news broke, I thought that was great. And then I wake up like at 8 a.m. this morning, pull up my phone, and I don't know who I actually didn't see Woj's tweets. I was just like scrolling through the timeline real quick just to make sure. And then I saw some Laker fans being like, some folks, you know, I think it's guys like you, like East Coast Laker fans saying, wow, we got him locked in. And I was just like, oh, who are they talking about? And so I scroll, then I go right to Woj's Twitter. And I was like, holy shit, this guy took a 5-year extension with us? And so, you know, obviously I was excited. I immediately tweeted out. I was like, this is the best deal for the Lakers because it gives us stability. And that's the thing that, like, I think I take from all of this is that for the first time in, basically since Kobe retired,
Mm-hmm.
we have some stability. We have some um we know what we are going to be. We know who is going to lead this franchise, and it's not just Anthony Davis's 5-year extension. It's also LeBron, like
Mm-hmm.
basically re-upping for another year. And it seems as though, obviously everything's gone perfectly for us. Winning a championship, everything has gone perfectly for the Lakers in year one with Anthony Davis. But I think there is a I didn't have anxiety over what deal he would take, but there's definitely still that feeling of relief knowing that he's taking a longer term extension, because now I can be like, all right, I don't need to think about what's going to happen about from 2 years from now. Like, are we going to, not that we're going to lose him, but like, you know, is he still going to be good, or is he, still going to be effective, or is he still going to want to be on this team, or is he going to, decide that maybe he wants to go home and play, which is an honorable cause and stuff like that. These guys, even though the Lakers are the Lakers, players are players. And if they want to play somewhere else, they're always welcome to go ahead and do that. But for him to kind of just say, this is where I want to be for the next 4 years and possibly 5 years, it just offers a type of relief, mental relief as a fan that I'm excited for. Now, if LeBron, after his thing is done, he wants to retire, or if he wants to go back to Cleveland for one last hurrah or something, obviously, I don't think he's going to do that. I think LeBron's going to retire, Laker. I feel good about him kind of giving Rob that head start. Like, look, I'm going to be here for 4 years, so we're always going to need to compete for championships and be a successful franchise. But I'm letting you know I'm here for the next 4 years. So you need to start doing your advanced planning and your advanced sabotage of other franchises and your advanced recruiting that you need to do to bring the guys that you need to bring.
I mean, you're right. I mean, we haven't been stable in a long time. So the Lakers win the championship this year and get good. And even if AD would have taken a 1-1 or a 2+1 or whatever, while I wouldn't have thought that he would leave, there's still that thought of, well, wait a minute, what happens if he does leave? What happens if LeBron all of a sudden regresses, or he gets an injury and AD is looking at another team that has another young superstar? There's always that thought out there. And so it takes all of that off the table. For Anthony Davis, not that I've always kind of been against the idea that he was injury prone, because AD, he's never had a catastrophic injury. He's usually played at least 65 or 70 games almost most of his career. So I never thought that. But one, if he's got any concerns about injuries, well, he's got a 5-year contract now, so he's got his money locked up. Also, I think for the Lakers, in a lot of ways, they did get him at a discount, because if the cap does go up, which we suspect after the coronavirus and all this stuff is done, the cap will probably spike at some point or go back up. They got him at a set number, so they know what they're going to be working with. And when this all happened here, at least on the East Coast, man, I was walking my dog this morning, and I was walking through the door, and I said to myself, like, all right, AD, like, this is taking too long. Like,
Yeah,
you're taking your time, but like whatever deal you're going to take, like, come on, man. And my friend had texted me, and that's how I found out. And I think for LeBron to take his 2-year extension and for Anthony Davis to take a 5-year extension, it does a number of different things. One, I know Laker fans love to talk about who the next star is going to be. At least in the short term, it takes the Lakers out of getting any other max guys, at least in free agency. Now, if there's a max guy that, like a Bradley Beal, that wants to try to force his way out of DC, the Lakers will figure out a way to do whatever they can do, if they can, given whatever the salary cap is at that moment. But this particular offseason, what we've seen is the Lakers have 2 of the top 5 players in the NBA. I'd argue 2 of the top 3 players in the NBA, best players in the NBA. And Rob Pelinka has shown that he can put competent role players around these guys. I don't think they need a third guy at this point. Really, look, up until Golden State got Kevin Durant, in the modern NBA, nobody really was talking about a third star. Shaq and Kobe didn't have a third star. I mean, granted, the Showtime Lakers, they had Worthy and Magic and Kareem, but Kareem was at the downside of his career. But there's never really been a 3-star team. The Heat had a 3-star team, but that's kind of more of a recent thing. All you really need is 2 stars, and you can win. The Lakers know exactly what they're working with going forward. And the LeBron news probably came out of the number of years AD took was a shock. The LeBron news, no one knew he was talking to the Lakers about an extension. And I was reading more about why he may have done that. And you probably know this, but the rule of 38,
Yeah,
which
the under 38 rule. Yep.
right, for LeBron, he's going to turn 38 in a couple of years, and for him, at that point, he won't be allowed to sign a 5-year max, a quote unquote max extension.
Mm-hmm.
So at that point, for him, taking this 2-year extension, which is equivalent of an 8% increase year over year, that's the best that he could have done at this point, unless when they renegotiate the CBA, they changed the rule or whatever. But that stung him also when he was in Cleveland because it was the under 38 or 36 rule at that point. Now it's the under 38 rule. So for LeBron, it makes sense. But we now have these guys locked up for the foreseeable future. And I feel like Rob Pelinka won the offseason. Like, I really feel like to get Anthony Davis locked up for not a 1+1 or a 2+1, but a 4+1. And I tweeted this out also. AD is going to be young enough to get another max deal, assuming no catastrophic injury. Hell, look, I was looking at some of the numbers for guys that I consider his equivalent at 31. Charles Barkley still was putting up all-star numbers at 31. So was Karl Malone. So was Tim Duncan. He's arguably more talented than all of those guys. And so if he's healthy at 31, he could probably sign one more max. And if the Lakers already haven't replaced LeBron with another guy, he should still be good enough to convince another superstar at AD at 31 that, hey, I've got 4 more years left in me. Let's make a run at it.
So I mean, so even if you think about the other guys that have extended, that are the restricted free agent class of guys that just extended, right? Jason Tatum took a 4+1. Donovan Mitchell took a 4+1. Brandon Ingram took a full 5-year guaranteed deal. But that's the next generation of guys, right? And a lot of those guys are guards. They're not big men. Like Bam was, I think, the only guy who's a big man who got extended like that. So if we're thinking about pairing, and I really don't want to look that far ahead because so many different things can happen within the course of 4 years, but you can see how that's lining up. Like the way to evaluate your franchise's success in the modern NBA is not going to be over a 10-year period anymore. It's going to be every 4 years. Every 4 years, what are you doing to remain competitive? Who are you recruiting? Who are you signing? What are the like role players that you're bringing on and stuff like that? And that's something that I think Rob Pelinka understands. I think he understands that the window of opportunity to win championships and sustain a team that constantly, allows you to do that is a much shorter time period than what it used to be, right? Because for us, like growing up, like to win a championship, even in a single decade was like, wow, like amazing. But then when the Lakers started winning 1, 2, 3 in a single decade, and then the Spurs were winning all the other ones in a single decade, people are like, oh, hold on a second. Like real dynasties are ones that do it over and over again. And then most importantly, they repeat in consecutive years. That's a real dynasty that you're talking about. So one of the things that I think Rob brings to this Lakers team is always having that vision and foresight that there's no room for complacency when it comes to chasing championships. But at the same time, I think he acutely understands that, okay, I've got him now for 5 years, right? I only had him on his last year. The very best thing that could possibly happen is that he won a championship for us. And in year 2 of LeBron, year 1 of AD, or year 1 of that pairing, it ended up being successful. So now, like when I don't even know how to describe it. Like, we normally you say like the way we would say it is if we drafted these guys, we would say like, oh, our franchise cornerstones, right? So it's weird to say that because obviously LeBron's been to different teams and Anthony Davis came from New Orleans. So I don't want to use the word franchise cornerstone because I think that's like more specific to guys like Tatum and Jaylen Brown, guys who get drafted to the team. But these guys are pillars of this franchise. And when you have that sort of structure and when you have that sort of buy-in and you have the equity to say, we already won a championship, we know what's going to allow us to continue winning championships, having those two pillars makes a massive difference in how you can build sustainability in your franchise. And that's something that I think that's something that like it's not appreciated as much now. But I think it's something that Laker fans, including ourselves, is something that we'll learn to appreciate later because of what we went through with drafting all the guys that we drafted and making this move for Anthony Davis. So for me, like the way and I know this sounds we said this on the last podcast. I know it sounds like cliche, but we did this exercise 20 years ago. 20 years ago when Eddie Jones and Eldon Campbell got traded for Glenn Rice, the Lakers reeled off like 62 wins or something absurd, and they won a championship. The very next year, they shuffled guys around. They won that first championship, I think, with AC Green. Then the second year, they still made moves on the margins. They increased. Derek Fisher was actually our sixth man for like the very first title, and they increased his minutes. They increased Rick Fox's minutes. Glenn Rice was gone. They ended up, I think Rick Fox ended up being a starter for us in the absence of that. We bring in Horace Grant as our power forward. They made moves around the margins to enhance what Kobe Bryant and Shaq were doing on the court. And when I think about what we did last year in a free agent situation where we were the last ones to make any decisions and grab the guys that we want to grab, and then we think about what we're doing now, Rob is building a sustainable contender. And a big part of that sustainability, which is LeBron's extension, which is great for me personally, because now I don't have to read all these weird writers that are going to be writing about, well, is LeBron could possibly considering leaving to some other team. We have at least that sustainability for the next 2-3 years until we have to approach that conversation again. And frankly, I don't know. I don't think LeBron's leaving the Lakers. I think he's going to try and retire a Laker, and he's basically signed a contract that's going to keep him in LA for longer than he was in Miami. So that should also tell you something about the trust that he has in this organization too as well. And so, that relief comes from the idea that I trust our franchise, I trust our front office to build a sustainable contender. And that's the only way I can describe it. Like I'm so like, I'm just happy. Like I woke up, like I was genuinely happy. I was like, finally, like we're done with this. Like I don't care what Giannis signs. I don't care what anybody else signs. I really don't care. Somebody else can make a big splashy trade to, improve the competitive landscape in the Western Conference. I really don't care, man. We got a champion. We got a championship already. And I feel confident that in my lifetime, I will get to see the Lakers be the most winningest franchise in NBA history. And, obviously health is the most important thing and stuff like that, but it's a good time to be a Laker fan, man. It's a really good time.
Well, you mentioned it before. Teams used to look at their franchise, or franchises would look at their teams like, a 10-year window. How do you build it for 10 years? But really, the owners did it to themselves when they took away those 7-year max contracts, right? You used to be able to lock up a Shaq for 7 years. Now they were complaining that the guys were getting these contracts were too long. They shortened the contracts up. And now these guys are signing for 4, maybe 5 years. But then if your franchise is terrible, these guys are forcing their way out within 2 or 3 years of their contract. And so you've got to look at, really at best, you've got a 2 or 3 year window to build a contender. And if you don't, your guy may force an out. And I think for Anthony Davis, you look at how things went for him in New Orleans. I mean, look, man, New Orleans drafted an all NBA, all-time talent in Anthony Davis. And I think he did all he could. New Orleans was really never able to attract the kind of superstar talent to really help him. And then they were a small market. And I think that they, being, having that dotted line to the Saints, and I can't recall the Saints executive that was kind of loosely overseeing Dell Dempsey's decisions as well. But
it was Gail Benson, which was Tom Benson. I think her husband passed away.
Yeah,
it was Gail Benson.
Gail's the owner. Mickey Loomis. Mickey Loomis. Sorry. He was in charge of the Saints. So Demps really had a dotted line to him, and they treated the Saints kind of like treated the Pelicans kind of like the Saints, where when in the NFL, when a star player wants something, really, he has no say. I mean, because the NFL operates very differently than the NBA does. And when Davis needed help and he wanted help, they kind of largely ignored him. And I think when he got to LA and he saw how willing Jeannie and Rob and everybody was willing to work with him and LeBron, and then they end up winning a championship in year one, which I know we all had hoped they did that, expecting it as another thing, but they pulled this thing off. And then to see Rob retool the roster as quickly as he did in a shortened off season, that gave, I think, AD a huge vote of confidence. And I'm looking at what Bobby Marks said his breakdown of his contract is. And so this year, AD is going to make $32.7 million. at the end of the contract, assuming he opts in, he'll make $43 million. Now you weigh that against what a guy like John Wall, who just got traded for a Russell Westbrook. John Wall this season is going to make $41 million. AD won't break $40 million until 23, 24, right?
Yeah.
Like they have AD on a discount, man, compared to his contemporaries.
Yep,
and that is crazy.
Yeah, and that's the coup I was talking about. Getting a guy who's probably, arguably, a top 3 player, like when he's on, like that's pretty insane to get at that value. And I cannot understate how much of a difference that makes. Obviously, he has to remain healthy. That's the most important part. But for what he is and how good he is, that's an unreal number to get him at.
I mean, he's gonna in 22, 23, he's gonna make roughly $7 million less than John Wall, and I believe he's about 3 years younger. That's crazy. So the Lakers absolutely got to win in this situation, and then beyond that, LeBron James, man. So LeBron James signing this extension, the vote of confidence, one, signing the 4-year deal, the 3+1 that he signed coming here, but then this extension, he never trusted Dan Gilbert in the way that he trusted Jeannie Buss, like clearly.
No,
and you know me, I'm never one to shy away from political talk and race talk. There are political reasons why LeBron, I don't think, trusts Dan Gilbert. I think that there are basketball reasons why he didn't trust Dan Gilbert. We all remember that letter Dan Gilbert wrote when LeBron left for Miami, that first time or whatever. Like, I know Dan Gilbert was willing to spend money on the Cavs, but LeBron James almost always had to, after that initial 7-year contract, I believe, extension he signed, I think, early on in his career, the first 7 years he was there, he always had to kind of like keep his foot on Dan Gilbert's neck just to make sure, hey, I might leave.
Mm-hmm.
And for him to trust Jeannie this late in his career, man,
there's a video. There's a video of, and I think a Laker fan reshared it, of Rob Pelinka as LeBron is signing his contract, and Rich Paul's on the opposite side of the table. I think it's LeBron's house or somebody's house or whatever it was. And Rob specifically says, I think his language is real talk. If we're ever doing something that's not excellent, make sure you let us know. Whether it's either you, as in he's talking about LeBron. This is way before AD. You, LeBron, or your team, referring to Rich Paul and Clutch. If we're ever not doing something excellently, we need to know that. And those small things, that sort of like attitude. And LeBron just says, he says that's great, or he just says, thank you, or it's not like some sort of overwhelming response that he gets to Rob. But when you look at Rob's like expression, his demeanor when he says that, he's like dead serious. I think Rob acutely understands the importance of not just keeping your stars happy, but what does that actually mean, right? Because obviously he was Kobe's agent, but I would say that Kobe's priority in life, probably, it wasn't just, obviously making the most money he could for generational wealth and stuff like that, but it was winning, being a great team, to the point where he had he was willing to demand a trade away from the Lakers if they weren't going to be serious about winning. And Rob stood by him all the way through, regardless of how many championships he had brought. Kobe was willing to break the equity that he had built with this franchise if it meant that winning wasn't a priority. And LeBron strikes me as a type of guy who's like that as well. He's not interested in complacency. It's one of the rare. I've written about it before. It's one of the rarest qualities that a superstar can have. Never getting complacent, and never getting complacent in the form where you don't allow your franchise to get complacent as well. And I think you're right. I think the only way that he could prevent the Cavaliers from being a complacent team when he decided to go back was to have to take those short-term contracts. And I think him taking these extensions and taking that 4-year deal is Magic, Jeannie, Rob, all of them saying, Lakers are not interested in complacency. We're interested in winning championships, because we know what that means, not only just to the fans, but what it means even for like business. Your franchise valuation goes through the roof. Look at what happened to the Warriors when Joe Lacob bought them and they started competing in the playoffs to win a franchise. Nothing adds more value to your brand. Nothing adds more value to your team than winning championships. And I think I've seen people make this argument before, not argument, but like kind of say this what if scenario before. But can you imagine if a guy like LeBron James had landed on the Lakers from the very beginning of his career, like what it would have done for his career, like just from a sheer talent standpoint. Like obviously you have to have a little bit of luck and stuff like that, but even Anthony Davis. If a guy like Anthony Davis had landed on the Lakers earlier in his career, maybe he didn't have to wait till year 7. Like maybe if in like year 4 instead of restricted free agency for whatever reason he decided to leave and stuff like that. And that's the thing that like we can talk about it another time. But like the only thing that is preventing some of these guys from being incredible, like getting the things that they want and being successful, is like, and I've talked to friends about this, is restricted free agency. That is the closest thing to, a guy being put up in an auction and then a team saying, go figure out how much you're worth on the market. And regardless of whether you want to be here or not, we'll you're going to have to play for us for another, 3, 4, 5 years, because that's usually those kids that have to sign those contracts are like 21 years old. It's the first biggest payday they'll ever get in their life.
They're not turning it down.
They're not going to turn it down. And I think that if restricted free agency was gone, if it was gone, you would have so many owners ready to sell their franchises because they know that they're only in the business of filling seats and trying to turn a profit. And if they were losing guys like Jason Tatum, Brandon Ingram, Donovan Mitchell to teams like the Lakers, the Knicks, the Heat, teams that care about winning, that are serious about winning, if they were losing people at a 4-year clip, regardless of where they draft them, I think the NBA would actually get better. I think teams with owners that are not serious about winning and that have basically been stringing their fan bases along under the guise of them wanting to be serious about winning. I think they would sell their franchises, and you would get guys like Steve Ballmer, like Joe Tsai, who are like, hey, I'll buy your franchise because A, I like basketball, B, it's a profitable business, but C, I know it matters. Winning matters. And I hope, one day when that happens, when restricted free agency is fully gone from the NBA, you're going to see a massive dynamic shift in this league. But, as we were originally talking about, like, I can only imagine how good LeBron would have been if he didn't have to spend 11 of his career years in Cleveland. And those first 7 years, people do revisionist history and stuff like that, but he was there for 7 years, and then look at what he's done since then. He went to Miami, which was a more competitive or more competent front office, won 2 championships, took a pay cut to do that, by the way, for Pat Riley. Goes back to Cleveland, says, this is how you win. This is how you win a championship. Rips off 4 straight finals runs, wins another championship. Then clearly Cleveland's like, all right, we did it your way. We got a championship. Thanks. We're out of here. And Dan Gilbert decides to go back into mediocrity again. LeBron's like, all right, I'm going to go to an organization that's serious about winning. And he wins a championship in year 2. And who knows how well they could have potentially done in year 1. They may have made it to the Western Conference Finals the way that they were trending if he doesn't get hurt and stuff like that. So that consistency, that greatness, I can only imagine how much better he could be. And that's why, like, I have so much confidence, not aside from the fact this is a Lakers podcast, I'm a Lakers fan, but I'm just watching him play. Like, this guy's not even breaking a sweat some of these games. And the one thing I'll tell you is this. When Kobe and Shaq did it the first time, there was adversity. In the regular season, it seemed like there was more adversity. But that Laker team flipped a switch in the playoffs. And if you think that this Laker roster now is worse than it was last time, a lot of people are going to be in for a rude awakening when when LeBron's not on the floor and this team is rolling other teams because they have guys that are coming off the bench that can score, which is something that hurt them a lot. So, this is my long-winded thing is here to say is that's like, this sustainability is not just for the Laker franchise. It's also for a guy like LeBron. He knows that he has a partner in crime in Anthony Davis that he likes, somebody who that gets along with him. And it's like a fountain of youth for LeBron. He's watching Anthony like go through these motions himself. And maybe for him to some degree, it's also it's sort of like going through it himself again for the first time. Except now you're doing it with like a franchise that's like, okay, we'll find the right guys around you to make you better and stuff like that. And it's all collaborative. It's all inclusive. Every single guy that the Lakers have signed, it seems like LeBron is part of that conversation when it comes to making the trade or stuff like that. So I'm sure he loves it.
Oh, he's got to. And I think that the Lakers are probably the best equipped franchise in the entire NBA to deal with superstars, just from top to bottom. And I think it starts with Dr. Jerry Buss, obviously. The way he embraced superstars. I mean, him and Magic's relationship was probably, I mean, it was a father-son relationship. It was very different from probably any other owner and superstar relationship. The way that, he gave Magic ownership in the team. I mean, he signed him to the largest contract in NBA history at the time, a 25-year contract. Just the way he treated him was differently. Jeannie and Magic, she seems to be closer to Magic than her own brother. I mean, like, so the way that the Lakers embrace their star players is just different. And to your point, I've long had an issue with the NBA rewarding dumpster franchises with superstar 18, 19, and 20-year-olds.
Yeah.
Because you're rewarding failure with these guys who have worked hard the last 18, 19 years to get to the pinnacle of their young careers, to go to franchises that only see them as dollar signs, that don't really want to cultivate their talent. And while the Lakers aren't known for homegrown talent, look, if you're a young superstar, as Magic was and as Kobe was, you'll stick around in Los Angeles, or the Lakers will trade you to another franchise for a superstar player, and they'll go further with that player. But like, the Lakers are just better equipped to deal with these guys. And I think for someone like LeBron, you and I have talked about this before, that Kobe extension in 2013, I think it was a beacon to not the star players, but like the superstar players, the top 1% of the guys in the NBA. And the Lakers were really criticized for that deal because Kobe had torn his Achilles already, but Jeannie was adamant about, this guy's going to finish his career for us. And at the time, they clearly weren't paying him for on-court production or what he was going to be going forward.
Right.
They were basically paying him for what he had already done because he was actually underpaid. The same as LeBron is underpaid. I understand just in the general world, these guys are super well paid. But in the course of what they generate for the NBA and their teams, they're underpaid players. The Kobes, the LeBrons, those guys are on a different level. Like, LeBron was making $16 million in Miami. And that's just ridiculous. So I think the way the Lakers are looking at this, like, they partner with these 1% guys in a way that other teams don't. And you see this like with the other pillar franchise in the Boston Celtics, the difference in how the Celtics and Lakers operate. Because I don't judge the Lakers against the Knicks or against the Heat or the Warriors or the Bulls or even the Spurs. It's really the Celtics and the Lakers. And the way the Lakers treat their superstars as they round out their careers versus how Boston does it is night and day. Danny Ainge and the Celtics treat their superstars clearly like they're an asset. And if they can flip you, as they did Isaiah Thomas for Kyrie, as we heard they tried to do Kemba this last offseason, they will get rid of you in a heartbeat. And the Lakers look at it like, hey, it's in our best interest to reward these guys, even if they're at the tail end of their careers. It's in our best interest to reward them.
Like,
they
okay,
send that message.
And I think the easiest one-to-one example is, of course, Kobe's extension, and then what happened with Paul Pierce, right? And Paul Pierce is never going to say anything bad about the Boston Celtics because he put a lot of his time there, and a lot of their fans and stuff rooted for him and stuff like that. But one of the things I think folks need to understand also is that there are players in the league now that do care about their legacy. They do care about what their final, I don't want to say rights, because that's usually about, like, you know, dying and stuff like that. But, you know, like, what their final rights out of the league are like. And when we talk about Paul Pierce today, if you had to start a conversation on NBA Twitter about Paul Pierce, the first thing you're going to get is all the jokes that he was on the receiving end of in for the Clippers or for the Nets.
Play for the Wizards?
Or for the Wizards. Yeah, exactly. And it's one of those things that, like, I think maybe fans don't realize that, or maybe they do or they don't, or they don't realize how much importance is applied to it. Because today Paul Pierce has to deal with all those jokes, even though he works in a media in media form, right? Like his like analysis is discounted because of how he ended his career, and there's sort of like a rephrasing of exactly what his legacy is. But Boston fans will tell you he was a great player, and by all means, he was a great player for that team. But how his career ends, especially in this era of social media and stuff like that, that matters. And so,
well, there's a difference between his career and, say, not just Kobe's, but Tim Duncan's and Dirk Nowitzki's.
Right. Yeah, very true.
Like
the way
Dallas,
that Dirk
Nowitzki is Dallas's greatest player of all time. They didn't want to see him round out his career somewhere else. It was in their best interest to have him retire a Maverick.
You're absolutely right. So Dirk is a perfect counterexample to taking care of. Like, even Dallas clearly knew that they couldn't pay Dirk exactly what they wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And Dirk did give them a team-friendly deal to some degree. And so I think Mark Cuban worked it out in some manner on the backside as to how to take care of Dirk. But you also see that with Pat Riley and what happened with Dwayne Wade. Pat Riley, there was a number that Pat Riley refused to give Dwayne Wade because he wanted to move forward, which I understand. And my only thing is, it's okay to say business is business as a fan, but business is business until the human element of what you are as a business eventually catches up to you. And that is the way that you have to look at it. Nobody's going to look at Miami and say, well, they did Dwayne Wade wrong for not paying him, and he had to go to Chicago for 2 years to collect a bunch of money. But, he ultimately had his jersey retirement. So nobody's going to look at Pat, and Dwayne Wade's always going to say positive things. Same way Paul Pierce is going to say positive things about the Celtics and stuff like that. But for guys like LeBron, who doesn't want to be that guy, who doesn't want to be a guy who got moved for assets, even as his career was dwindling down, like, that Kobe contract, it was a beacon of letting people know that if you're serious about winning and if you're serious about being part of this franchise, we will make sure that we take care of you. And, I've seen Celtic fans and I've seen other fans be like, well, you guys traded Pau Gasol. Well, you guys traded Lamar. You guys were willing to trade Lamar Odom. He's like, yeah, but even Pau Gasol and Lamar Odom knew that, like, all right, like, we're not going to be, like, we're not as effective as we used to be. Like, they also understood that, like, there is a shelf life to what they are. And the other thing, to be honest, Pau Gasol was being traded for a young Dwight Howard. Gasol was being traded for a young Chris Paul. So it's not like we traded them for assets, right? The Celtics traded KG and Paul Pierce for picks. So it wasn't the same exact thing. It was making a move on the margins to improve the guys that were around Kobe and stuff like that. But that's the thing. And obviously we know how much love Pau had for Kobe, because Kobe and Pau had a very special relationship as brothers. And that's paying dividends, because today Marc Gasol wants to go and play for the Lakers. And he's on the tail end of his career, and he wants to continue competing for championships. And that's why he came to the Lakers. That's specifically the reason that he mentioned. He wants to continue competing for championships. So that's my thing. Like, it's when doing these kinds of moves and getting these kinds of commitments from guys like Anthony Davis and guys like LeBron, one who's very young, one who's very old at different points in their careers, it helps bring sustainability to a franchise, but it's also like a positive reinforcement, I think, for fans and for the front office as well, where we could turn around and say, hey, what we did before, we did it the right way. And because we did it the right way, we're being rewarded for that now. And I think that's great for the Lakers. I think this franchise, assuming everybody stays, obviously health is the number one most important thing. LeBron went on that road tripping podcast to say, what's the most important thing to repeating for a championship? He said health. Most important thing is health. That was the most important thing last year. That's going to be the most important thing this year. As long as this team can remain healthy, I have a lot of trust that Vogel can figure out all the moving parts. And I have a lot of trust that Rob Pelinka will find the right deals and the right guys to plug in all the holes that we have on this team. So it's a good day, man. I just woke up. So after I posted that tweet, like, holy shit, this guy took a 5-year extension. Everybody's like, oh, it looks like the West Coast guys are just waking up. I'm like, yeah, bro, I didn't expect this to break at 5 o'clock in the morning. I thought it would break like midday, like when everybody's on their phones and stuff like that, or right before everybody goes to sleep, because that's when all the Laker news has been breaking. It's not early in the morning; it's usually like towards the end of the day. And so, like, I was just like you, man. I was just sitting here, and I was just sitting here, and I was like, either AD's doing something, he must be recruiting or something, or like, what is he doing? Why is it taking him so long to decide this? Some people said that he's just trying to avoid training camp by like holding out as much as he possibly can when it comes to signing, which is fine. He's earned it. The Lakers have a short rest, and based on LeBron's body language, when they asked him, what do you think about preseason games? LeBron's like, I'm not worried about preseason. So I was like, I'm pretty sure we're gonna get a lot of Taylor Horton Tucker minutes in the preseason and stuff like that. So it's good, man. It's a great day to be a Laker fan. It's a great day to think about the Lakers also moving forward. We have stability. We have structure. We know who we're going to be building this team around for at least the next 3-4 years. And that makes my life much easier as a fan to know, like, what is it that we need to be great. And we've got two of the best two-way players in the league, like the best, both offense and defense. And they bring it every night. And I don't expect LeBron to be complacent this year coming up. And I don't expect Anthony Davis to be complacent this year coming up. I think they're going to prioritize their health. But I think they're serious. And I don't think they're going to forget that they didn't get the MVP and the Defensive Player of the Year and all that stuff last year. I think they remember that Giannis got both of those things, even though they probably both had a really good case for it. So we'll see, man. The West is going up and down in terms of like the quality of teams that are out there. Lakers could run the table. Lakers could chill out and take it, prioritize their health and play it safe. But regardless, they're in a great space for this upcoming season and the future beyond.
Yeah, the future is bright, man. I'm glad that I'm not worried about anything free agent wise. I'm not worried about any trades. All I'm worried about the Lakers continuing to improve around the margins. And right now, they are as good as they have been, honestly, probably since the Lakers had Powell and Lamar and Ron Artest, and that team was really well rounded. That's probably the last time they were this good. But
they've changed the complexion of this league. Okay, like all these centers that are getting overpaid, all the people that were telling us that, oh, the Lakers can't play two bigs, it's not sustainable. It's not sustainable. Obviously, against certain matchups, it's certainly not sustainable. You are seeing what happens when a team decides this is what we're going to do because we know this is what winning basketball is and what it does to the rest of the league. You are seeing a lot of centers, I'm not going to say get overpaid because they have earned those contracts for their play, but you are seeing teams now go to two bigs. I need a stretch four that can actually defend and play backup five if I need to. And people are going out to get real centers because they're worried that if I have to face the Lakers in the finals or on the way to the finals, I need my team not to get bodied on the interior the way the Lakers bodied everybody in the playoffs in the interior to the point that they had to go to. The Lakers are the trendsetters. All the wave of take more threes. The Lakers said, nope, that's not what we're doing. We're not just going to keep taking more threes. We're going to do it our way. And now the rest of the league is now going to try and prioritize to match up with what they did well. So they're a great place to be in, man. Teams are now trying to load up. This is what happened with Shaq. Shaq won that championship, and teams are like, oh, shit, we got to start drafting big-ass centers to deal with this guy because we're going to have to see him like at some point in the playoffs or in the finals.
No, I agree, man. The Lakers are certainly trendsetters, and I wouldn't be surprised if other teams start stacking up, and I wouldn't be surprised if you see centers start getting a little bit more money as things go forward, or you start seeing, bigger guys start getting drafted. So, the league will start up December 22nd, and the Lakers may very well get their rings on opening night against the Clippers. I don't know if they really will. I know a lot of people think they will, but I don't know if the Lakers had enough time to get rings made and all that kind of stuff with such a short turnaround. But it would be poetic justice if the Lakers got their rings on the night that they played the Clippers. That would just be after the story that broke about the Clippers the other day from The Athletic, which we'll probably get into on NBA Weekly. But man, so we'll close out on that. You guys have been listening to Lakers Central.